still free. You can't take the sky from me. Take me out to the black. Tell them I ain't coming back. Burn the land, boil the sea. You can't.
Okay, now that y'all seen the unboxing of this optic right here, we are mounting it to the DDI-47 sitting up on top. But the mount I went with is the Atterro mount. Go ahead and open this up for you. It is a slightly different mount than most mounts. Instead of being on the side rail or a Picatinny mount somewhere, this is, as you can see, it replaces your rear sight piece. There's a roll pin right here. There's a hole right here where your screw, which is this piece right here, sets in. So hopefully everything mounts up correctly. I don't think anybody's ever actually done a Riton with this mount on an AK, so kind of cool. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove, with the supply tools, which is nice. One is for your windage and elevation, which is this one. We don't need that one right now. We need this one. So we're just going to take the optic off the mount. It's just two simple screws. It's just like any type of RMR style optic. We're going to hold on to those screws because more than likely we will be using the same. Come on, there we go. Try not to strip them out. Sometimes you can strip them out. It's not unheard of. So there's the two screws. An optic comes right off. Now there's your optic. Now that we've got our optic off, you can see it's off. I wanted to do one quick test before mounting it, and it looks like it's going to work. I was afraid that this thing was actually going to sit too high to actually use the rear sight, because there is a slight rear sight built into the rear. But from looking at it, it does look like it is close enough that I can still use the built-in sight here as a sight versus this. Now, the good thing is this will actually be kind of beneficial to me running this over something like an RMR or something other than this style of optic, and that's because of this right here. If anybody remembers, XS Sight Systems had an amazing rear sight for your AR. What it was you had your peephole, and then right above it was actually this type of pistol sight system. What that was meant for is you could use that small aperture for most engagements, but if you needed something fast and you were just using irons, you could use it like a pistol sight. So you would have a slight height over bore, which you could use sparingly. It's not going to be accurate out to, like, 100 yards, but anything within like 25 yards and in, it was meant for to be fast and accurate. So I think I'm actually going to be getting something similar to that, because there is a much wider rear sight portion. Like this right here is a very tiny, it is super skinny, you can barely see it. But if you know AK sights, the rear sight is always going to be very tiny, and it's meant for open eye, both eye open sight picture, and it's very beneficial for it. Like I said, I think I'm actually going to get something like the I think it's a CSAT rear sight for ARs with this particular setup. So it looks like it's going to work. Now let's get the actual rear sight off the AK so we can mount this, then mount the optic to the mount. Okay, now that we've got the optic set up ready to go onto the mount, now we have to remove the rear sight. It is held in just by a spring in the bottom, pushing tension up. You can hear that kind of like ting. Rifle is clear. Anytime working with firearms, always remember to try to clear the firearm, remove any ammunition from the workspace. Simple as that. We're dealing with firearms, we're going to be working with them. Wear some type of simple things like gloves and stuff like that. You do have a screwdriver, you might smash your finger. So I'm actually going to stand up because I want to get a little bit of pressure on it. can definitely tell it's a brand new one. Okay, we finally got this rear sight off the gun. It took a little bit of force. This spring apparently did not want to come out, and this rear sight did not want to come out, but I finally got it finagled enough where I could get it out. I got this rifle used, but I'm about 100% sure that he never shot it, never done anything with it. So a lot of the parts are still really, really tight. Once you get your rear sight out, you're left with the spring. That's actually just, yeah, you can see it's still super, super in there. Come on. I actually do. Come on, baby. Oh, it's starting to move. There you go. There's your spring that actually holds your rear sight. That's what holds it in. And this one, I'm about 100% sure is pretty much brand new, except for the scratches and stuff on it. So now we got that off, we can go ahead and start putting the new part in. Okay, now that we've got this clear, we can start mounting this to the actual rear sight. It does come with really nice little rear spring, but what you want to first do has this little piece of machine metal here with a screw in it. I want to remove this because this is what actually holds your sight together. We're going to set this to the side. As you can see, it's set up in a way that it sits down where your spring was and slides right in, so it sandwiches it down. Now that's in there, we're going to go ahead and install our roll pin before I drop it. Good thing this thing is kind of like a catch-all. Let's see here. Should be able to, let me grab my hammer. You gotta have two hammers. Your big your work hammer, and then when it doesn't want to work right, hammer. So I'm gonna just tap it in, get it all lined up nice and good. Now that we got the rear sight block on, you can see it's on. I've got to even it out just a bit. I went a little bit too much on one side, so just a couple love taps. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but it needs to have a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? There should be enough on this side and that side. If it's on one side or the other, it's not that big of a deal. It's mainly there to hold that piece in like that. So now that it's in there, we can mount our optic, which sits just like so. Get the holes lined up. Which is always the fun part. There we go. It sit just like that. Okay, now that we've got the rear sight put in like we're supposed to, the mount sitting in there, and the optic, I'm first going to try the factory screws to see if they will work before moving on to the supplied screws that Atterro sends with it. So I'm only going to use one. Doesn't look like it's coming through. Looks like it's going to fit really tight. So that is a major plus because I didn't want to have to find new screws for this. So Raiton, your optics will work with the Bravo mount, no problem. The factory screws will sit perfectly. Okay, now that we know that the factory screws will fit this perfectly without much issue, or technically any issue, they do send you some Loctite, and they recommend you use blue Loctite. I was trying to say them both together for some reason. That will probably go into a bag somewhere because you can never need enough. You could always use more Loctite, but I've got red Loctite I use on pretty much everything, so that's what I'm going to use. Because I'd rather me have trouble taking the optic off than versus the optic coming off. Blue Loctite should be good. I just like using red Loctite. So put a dab of it on there. Doesn't have to be a lot, but you do want some on there. Try to make sure I don't get all over the place. And then you want to go ahead and start screwing these down in. Once you start screwing them, like before, I like going down, coming back up, basically spreading that Loctite around as much as possible in those threads to make sure it coagulates and basically goopifies inside those threads. It's just a personal thing. I'd rather the optic not come off when I don't want it to come off versus me having trouble when I'm sitting on my bench. I think that's I've known people that use nothing but blue Loctite and they've actually absolutely loved it, but I just rather not. So now I'm just getting those little fine little, just making sure it's all nice and tight. That should be good there. Got the optic mounted. The final piece of this is actually this screw that comes with the Bravo mount. It mounts directly here. And on this one, you want to use the strength of Almighty Thor to like tighten this thing down. Same thing, red Loctite. This is an AK, they get hot, so I'd rather use a little bit of red Loctite versus blue. This part doesn't really get that hot, but at the same time, I'd rather be safe than sorry. It is a tiny screw, so don't lose it. On this one, instead of using theirs supplied, I'm actually going to start it with theirs, so I can go ahead and get it going. Come on, get in there. There you are. And start tightening it. And then I'm actually going to go to something with a handle. Way too big. Too small. It's always that weird in between size. That's going to keep it all locked down and as tight as you can. Let's clean it up and see what she looks like. Okay, that was a lot longer of a process than I was expecting. I was hoping it was going to be 10, 15, 20 minutes. It turned out to be almost an hour just because of how tight some of the things were getting this thing mounted, but we finally got it mounted. It sits extremely low on that mount and extremely close to that rear dust cover. You can take that dust cover off as so you can still do a field stripping if need be. It is just extremely tight. Make sure that's all good. Yep. Sight sits really low. I did find out what my fears was with this style of optic, how it sits. It's got that little girthy piece in the back there that I actually would not be able to see the built-in rear sight, and I cannot. What that means is, though, there is a built-in, let's see if we can see it. You see the dot there. There is a built-in rear notch right here where my finger is. It's a pretty wide rear notch, but it is almost the same width as the hooded front sight. So it's not going to be a super precise sight, but it is going to be an effective sight. We will test and see how far out I can actually shoot that with this setup. More than likely this weekend there's a match going on, so I'll definitely bring this out. Won't be for the match will not be for this. It will actually be for 22 NRL, but I think it looks extremely good. Hopefully in the next few days get it zeroed. But besides that, it went on fairly easy. It was just really tight, and I think it looks really good, especially once you get the magazine in there. It just kind of fills in that little bit of gap. And like I said, nothing it is as snag free as possible, and that's kind of what I wanted to build with this rifle is a kind of bare bones or as close to factory looking setup as I possibly can. The flash hider is done by JMac Industries and it looks like it belongs. The trigger is done by ALG. It looks like it belongs. And this optic setup here looks like it belongs. So I wanted a rifle setup that actually had something of a, if you just saw it sitting there, you thought it was a completely factory rifle, and I think I proved it off with this Raytheon optics. It looks really nice. The Atterro Bravo mount sits like extremely low, extremely nice. So hopefully we'll get out and shoot it very, very quickly. See y'all in the burst.